Good morning class, welcome to your daily current affairs on Paper Hindu. So let's see today's articles. Yes. Fine. So despite court stay, so on new IT rules, the court has been given a stay. So despite that stay, the OTT platforms face pressure on content. So based on the content that is being placed into OTT platforms, over the top platforms, still these platforms face certain issues on content delivery into these platforms. So yeah, new alert. In February 2022, it told the streaming platforms to ensure that the details of grievance officer are made publicly available on their websites. That means the first thing that is being mentioned for these OTT platforms is that if it is triggering certain people's thoughts, or if it is triggering a particular section community, or if it is violating them, then what happens? They should be able to contact a person called grievance readdressal officer. So the grievance officer have to be placed in these OTT platforms. At the same time, that officer details should be placed publicly in their platform. That is one. By in February 22, the government has been given this particular order. And the next one is on March 24, 2023, it told the platforms to exercise abundant precaution in ensuring that the films and web series do not foul the code of ethics. So basically this rating which we give in movies that are going into theatres or into our TV channels will be given certain kinds of rating. However, in your OTT platforms that rating is not available and there is no content restriction there. So mostly whatever the adult content or targeted content can be delivered, and right now by March 24th, what the government, again the Ministry of INB has mentioned is that is Information and Broadcasting. They have mentioned that you should be maintaining your code of ethics during your delivery of content. So now they are trying to protect, or they are trying to take in account, first thing is the grievance redressal mechanism. So ensuring the citizen charter and ensuring that there is a grievance redressal mechanism in these OTT platforms, at the same time to ensure the code of ethics. So they are trying to regularize these platforms. So yes, over the top or OTT streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime Video are facing pressure to comply with the IT rules 2021 to exercise further restraint in streaming of the mature content. So streaming of mature content, they are trying to find out what are the issues, and they are trying to content these, prohibit or restrict them in providing contents. So this is despite the fact that the two high courts have stayed provisions of the IT rules which require them to appoint a grievance officer and take down the content who ordered to do so by a self-regulatory body. So there should be a self-regulatory body at each particular platform's service. That means if it is from the Netflix, they should have their own grievance officer in their own platform whose details should be made public. So that is what they have mentioned here. So yes, they are facing issues. Fine. Next. So Supreme Court. See, Supreme Court modifies the order on ESZ around forests. So what is Supreme Court doing here? It is entering into again the legislative perspective. It is trying to, not trying to, but yes, it modified the ESZ rules. So what is this ESZ? It is economical sensitive zone. So eco-sensitive zones. Basically not economical, eco-sensitive zones. So these are the zones where certain activities are completely prohibited. So felling down of trees or any other kinds of industrial development, all these things are prohibited strictly in this particular area, whereas farming or activities which doesn't disturb this environment, the environment around it, such activities are okay, are fine with their activities in this particular areas. So in that regard, what Supreme Court has modified, we will see. So it reasoned that ESZ cannot be uniform across the country. Last year it had ordered 1 kilometer buffer zone for protected areas to act as a shock absorber. So what it is mentioned, that Supreme Court has mentioned that we cannot have the same ESZ rules for every other protected area or zoological park or botanical garden. It differs based on the particular location, and earlier the last year it has mentioned that for every particular zone, I mean every particular area, there should be a buffer zone of 1 kilometer which ensures that it is a shock absorber. That means the outer activities, industrial activities, infra or whatever the human activities should not be touching or disturbing the actual ecological features of that particular area. So the Supreme Court on Wednesday modified its judgment to have mandatory eco-sensitive zones of a minimum of 1 kilometer around protected forests. So in which areas they should be maintaining this particular buffer zone? Number 1, in protected areas. Next, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries across the country. So in all these 3 places, Supreme Court has mandated on Wednesday that there should be 1 kilometer buffer zone, no matter what. So agreeing, the court said the purpose of declaring ESZ is not to hamper the day-to-day activities of the citizens. If the direction as issued is continued, it would certainly hamper the day-to-day activities of the citizens residing in ESZ. As such, we find the direction needs to be modified. So if at all it is, if there is any kind of issue that it is disturbing people who are residing in that ESZ, definitely we need to modify if there is any further concerns. But as of now, there should be a mandatory declaration of 1 kilometer as a buffer zone around these areas of protected areas, national parks and different sanctuaries, wildlife sanctuaries. Fine. So in that particular area, mining within the national park and wildlife sanctuary and within the area of 1 kilometer from the boundary of national park and wildlife sanctuary is not permissible. So mining activities, industrial development, all these things near national park and wildlife sanctuary is strictly prohibited. So with that and add up, they have added that 1 kilometer buffer zone should be there. Next. So angry with reform delays, India calls UN system anachronistic. It means it is far back or far outdated, anachronistic. That is what anachronistic means. So what UNSC member, so our UN system, our member, the speaking member from India, representative is Miss Ruchira Kamboj. So she has reacted very adversely, stating that angry with the reform delays, India called UN system as anachronistic. So it has mentioned that it is anachronistic. So what is it about? With another year of meeting on reforming the United Nations and particularly the question of expansion of Security Council coming to a close in June, India lashed out UN system with its utmost scathing attack thus far. That means so far India had never been this much negative and critical, and it has showcased its comments in a negative way towards UN so far. Right now it has mentioned that clearly it is outdated, it is not something which is working as per the time required. So it is completely a old one, a very dead one. In the similar way, it is a very dead one, or it is not which is something required or which is having current standards. That is what our representative Ruchira Kamboj has mentioned. This comes in a backdrop. Why this discussion has come is that there is one particular meeting in this year which is having a discussion about reforming United Nations. During this particular time, Ruchira Kamboj has mentioned in that way. Why she has mentioned? Backdrop is India's UNSC's seat, permanent seat leave, but so far the expiry of existing seat have come by this year. So right now we are not part of UNSC. So we haven't got any kind of permanent membership in UNSC. At the same time, the existing seat is also been lapsed because of end of that particular agreement by 2023, by 2022 or by 2023. It has come to end. Right now, UNSC we don't have membership. So here the issue is that in a speech at the UNSC this week, the Indian permanent representative called the UN Charter as anachronistic and adding that it has failed in handling. So why it is being anachronistic, why it is back of time? So because it has failed clearly in controlling COVID-19 pandemic and addressing the issue of Russia-Ukraine war and terrorism and climate change. In all the issues in which global politics is spiking up, in every other issue UN has failed to curtail. That is why India has mentioned in that way. So this tough words, why it has come in the backdrop, there is a reflection of India's frustration at slow pace of intergovernmental negotiation process as well as its determination to keep UN reforms at the top of global bodies agenda, even though India is not a member of Security Council this year. This year India is not a member of UNSC. So by last year it has been done. Good morning Bhima Pavane. Fine. So that is about this particular article. So the backdrop is India have lost its membership in UNSC this year, and also in all the once in a century pandemic has been affected to entire world, then the reactionary or precautionary measures taken by UN did not address world as a whole, and it failed utterly in controlling or getting into control, controlling the Ukraine-Russia war. And the other thing is climate change and environmental impact, utterly failure. So in such cases, India has been clearly satirical, not satirical but critical. So it has critically mentioned its statements. Fine. So yes, that is about this article. Next. So I told you this article will be continued till at the end of the judgment given by Supreme Court, important for your Indian society and social justice. So right to marry is not absolute, laws regulate marriage, center tells Supreme Court. Important article, I will give you a gist, but I sincerely recommend you to go to the Telegram channel and download this particular document so that you can refer this particular article. So Solicitor General says that the social institution of marriage was shaped by world religions. He adds that the legal recognition of same-sex marriage is by making Special Marriage Act gender neutral should be debated in Parliament, not in the court. So all the time since the beginning of accepting the petitions on same-sex marriage by Supreme Court, the Parliament has been very strict, very stringent, stating that it is under our ambience. So it is not something that can be debated in Supreme Court or in judiciary. It is under the ambient of legislatures, and that too marriage and divorce is a concept which is mentioned in the list of concurrent list in your 7th schedule of Indian Constitution, which means that the ambience or jurisdiction of marriage and divorce and their concepts are completely related to center and state. So the ambient or jurisdiction of making any kind of laws related to marriage and divorce is in hands of both center and state. So they have to discuss, debate, and then they have to come up with a proper judgment, or not judgment but proper law, or legalizing or illegalizing or decriminalizing or criminalizing. Of course it is already decriminalized by Supreme Court, but still acceptance of same-sex marriage is still a debatable one. It is not absolute one which can be carried through Supreme Court, and it is a topic or concept which has to be debated in Parliament. That is what Solicitor General has mentioned. In this regard, he has mentioned another thing, that right now in Special Marriage Act it is clearly mentioned that a man has to be 21 years old in order to get married, and the women who should be entering into this marriage as a concept, into marriage agreement, definitely she has to be attaining her age of a minimum of 18 years. Now if the act is being gender neutral, who should be in which age? If it is a gender neutral act, then the age criteria is again an issue. So they have to discuss, debate. So it is not something which can be taken into court and discussed. It is clearly under the ambience of our Parliament. That is what Solicitor General has clearly mentioned about. Very good article. So the centre on Wednesday argued in Supreme Court that the right to marry is not an absolute right. So it is definitely not an absolute right, and the petitioners cannot compel the state to grant legal status to same-sex marriage. So they cannot force the government to give or to legalize their same-sex marriage, because it still needs to be discussed. And in a country with different societies like India, the concept of marriage has always been a religious concept. That means for every marriage ritual or the people who are getting into marriage traditions is backed up by religious laws. So even if a couple is getting married through same sex, most often if they are from India, they are often performing these activities as terms of religious perspective only. That means if the two couple are belonging to Hindu religion, their marriage, despite being same sex, their marriage will be under all the processes that are followed by Hindu religion. Same goes with Muslims, same goes with Christians, whatever the religion may be. So Solicitor General has mentioned that further, the right to marry does not include the right to compel. The state include a new definition of marriage. The right to marry, even among heterosexuals, is not absolute right. So even among heterosexuals, that means not homosexuality. So we are not only discussing about the same sex marriage, even among the heterosexuals also we have certain restrictions. So bigamy is not allowed. That means if a particular person is being married to some other person, that means if two people are there in a marriage relationship, and if that particular person wanted to have again at the same time with another, should be or willing to go into some other married relationship, it is completely prohibited in India, right? So that is what he has mentioned. See, law prescribes that a man should marry at 21 and a woman at 18. The law regulates your autonomy here. Obviously, your autonomy of marriage, that means your right to life and right to marry is still restricted. That autonomous is still not being guaranteed by Parliament. And next thing is the bigamy, which I was mentioning now. That means if a person is already into a marital relationship, and then if he wanted or she wanted to go into some other marital relationship at the same time, that bigamy is an offence in India, and here the law regulates the number of times you can marry. So of course, so you are always mentioning, as the Supreme Court, you are mentioning how far we can take this same sex case, so on. But still, the issue here is that when we are regulating the autonomous nature, when we are regulating how many times a particular person have to get into relation of marriage, when we are restricting all these things, then definitely it is under our ambient to discuss upon how far we can legalize the existing marriage relationship. That is what Solicitor General have argued. So yeah, the law even lists the grounds of judicial separation and divorce. Impotence is a ground for divorce. This is where a personal issue, that means even based on the personal health issue, it can also be ground for divorce. So all these are under the ambience of Parliament, so you cannot be discussing into Supreme Court. So but if it is a ground, you have to spell it out for divorce. So law has a hold on your privacy. So you need to understand that even your right to privacy is not an absolute right. Right to privacy is not an absolute right, right to marriage is not an absolute right, and they have clearly mentioned that marriage and divorce are completely backed up with a religion, so you cannot completely discuss and debate this in the Parliament. Very good article, so just go through this. Next. India intends to make healthcare affordable for whole world. So what is India's goal? So India's goal is to make the healthcare accessible for and affordable for not only for our citizens but for the whole world. Here the important concept is where this particular thing our Prime Minister has mentioned. So following the inauguration of 6th edition of One Earth, One Health Advantage Healthcare 2023. In this particular regard, so what is our motto here? Motto is inclusive healthcare, which is intends to make healthcare affordable. So affordable health to all is our motto. So one of our mottos. That is what this article, rest all is not much important. So yes, next. Only half of, so this is a constructive criticism which you can give on existing policies, government policies. So what is this about? Only half of the PMJDY, which is Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, insurance claims have been settled in 2 years. Shows inefficiency. So in the 2-year span, only 50% of the insurance claims have been settled. See how far the delays are there. So constructively we can mention that if at all there is any question on what are the government flaws in executing the existing schemes or programs. So in a schemes where the insurance cover for accidents or any other things which would actually benefit the family who have lost their loved ones, it would actually benefit, but what is happening in the span of 2 years, they are not even settling at least 50% of the cases. Shows the lack of efficiency. So in the past 2 financial years, only 329 of the 647 claims filed for accident insurance cover provided to bank account holders under Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. Again, the restriction is those who have bank accounts, only for them, for those people this will be settled, and among them also only 50% were being settled with this insurance cover. This information was revealed to a reply of an RTI. So, RTI has been filed, right to information application filed by an activist named Chandrasekhar Gaur in August 2014 while launching the Jan Dhan Yojana that was hailed as an unprecedented step for financial inclusion. So, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also announced the accident cover for the account holders. So, as part of Jan Dhan Yojana, accident cover is also a part of this PM Jan Dhan Yojana, but still only 50% efficiency is existing in this particular scheme. Fine. Next. I think we have one last article. No, two. Fine. Centre tells states to scrap levies on power generation. So, what happened? The Power Ministry in a communique, that means in an announcement, it has warns the states to rescind any unconstitutional impost including water cess that may have levied on power generating units such as levies, tax on non-residents. So, what is happening here? The Power Ministry have given strict instructions to state that if at all you are following any kind of unconstitutional imposement of taxes, or if you are collecting any kind of cess which is against the actual mentioned things, that means which is actually mentioned in the tax ambient, if you are going beyond that, it is completely unconstitutional and you should be revoking it as soon as possible. Resign in the sense revoking it as soon as possible. So, just stop that activities, and they have also mentioned that that type of levying taxes on or cess on power generating units is illegal on states. Fine. So, the Centre on Wednesday issued a terse warning, that means a strict warning to states against resorting to tax levies on electricity generation, including through imposition of water cess. That means for the places where the power is being generated, in that places they are trying to levy taxes including water cess. So, all these will be have been termed by Centre as illegal, and clearly they have mentioned that you should not be doing this. So, revoke it immediately, that is what Centre has mentioned. Some states have imposed taxes and duties on generation of electricity and underlined that this was illegal and unconstitutional, that is what they have mentioned. Any taxes levied on power generating unit is completely illegal now. So, yes, not much important, but yeah, we will see. So, the ambiguity is in nuclear liability law. So, what are the provisions of Indian nuclear liability law? What does it say about the supplier liability in the event of nuclear accident? That means, if at all there is any kind of accident occurred due to some nuclear issues, that means whatever the issue may be, but if there is any kind of human loss or any loss to that particular people who are working there, then what is the role of supplier? So, if there is any nuclear plant, who has kept that plant? So, it is not about the supplier, but the people. See, if a nuclear power plant is there, then who will be actually responsible if a particular person is being he has been suffered any kind of loss due to some accident in nuclear power plant? It would be the operator. So, the nuclear operator, whoever that particular nuclear power plant is there, whoever is the operator of that particular nuclear power plant, he will be or she will be liable for any kind of action. So, any kind of monetary benefits should be issued from that operator, but India's new civil nuclear law clearly mentions that there is certain rights, certain liability on supplier to, on nuclear supplier to, there is certain kinds of liability. So, yes, why do some provisions continue to make foreign companies wary of signing deals with India? What has the government said on this issue? So, certain nuclear, certain governments, foreign governments are still under confusion whether to sign up with India or not because of this particular Indian nuclear liability law. So, if now see, if there is a nuclear power plant, let us say a nuclear power plant, okay, So let's say a nuclear power plant is there, some kind of nuclear power plant. A nuclear power plant is there. Now there is a supplier and here you have an operator. People work here, employees. If at all there is any kind of issues or any kind of losses that have occurred to employees because of some mishap in this nuclear generator factory, in such cases, who should be actually responsible? The operator, nuclear operator must be actually responsible. So the liability is on the head of the operator, but the India's new nuclear law gives certain liabilities to supplier too. So they should also be giving certain economical monetary benefits to these people, because of which foreign countries, despite they are interested to establish infrastructure or provide, be a supplier of nuclear energy to India for civilian purposes, still they are also backing off because it is the responsibility of supplier too. Yes, fine. So that is one of the issue, and that issue only they are majorly focused upon. So issues regarding India's nuclear liability continue to hold up for more than a decade old plant to build 6 nuclear power plants. So here we are planning to build 6 nuclear power reactors in Maharashtra. So completely this 6 will be in Maharashtra, and that too it will grow as a very biggest one all over the world. So power reactors, 6 nuclear power reactors in Maharashtra's Jaitapur, the world's biggest nuclear power plant generation site under consideration at present. So for this particular plant, it is going to be world's biggest nuclear power plant, especially for civilian purposes. And right now the foreign governments or foreign institutes are also scared or are still in dilemma to whether to accept or not. So the laws on civil nuclear liability ensure that the compensation is available to the victims for nuclear damage caused by nuclear incidents or disaster, set out who will be liable for those damages. So what this law has given, whoever, no matter whose is the issue, that means is it because of the employee's mistake that that particular issue has happened, or is it because of the person who has who has been the operator, or because of the supplier, or because of any kind of infrastructure, no matter whose is the mistake, but the law guides that if there is any kind of damage occurred due to this nuclear power plant, then who will be the liability authority? So who will be the responsible authority? For that they have given that India for the first time introduced the concept of supplier liability. So who will be responsible? It is the supplier who will be liability over the above that of the operators in civil nuclear liability law. So over the nuclear operators, the actual liability will be on suppliers end. That is why the different governments are still thinking twice to enter into India's nuclear energy projects developments. So that comes under the back of your Maharashtra Jaipur, a prestigious project where it is going to be world's biggest nuclear power plant generator. Fine. So that is entirely about this article too. You can just go through. There's nothing more to mention about. So they have mentioned about Chernobyl incident, what has happened, and right now in India there are 22 nuclear power plants, nuclear reactors. So with over a dozen more still being planned. So 22 already existing, still 12 will be are under plans to be constructed. So all these things they have mentioned. So yes, you can just go through this article, rest all nothing much required. You need to understand the main criticism of the existing one is they have given the liability to suppliers. And that's it for today. We will meet in the next session and we will see further more articles. Thank you.